Hi, I'm Florian Schwarzer. I'm Senior Product Manager at Paradox Interactive.
I'm Kai Clooney. I'm the Creative Director at Heartsuit Labs.
All right, so we're here. You guys are just now revealing Bloodlines 2. How long have you guys been working on this for?
I think the first time you showed something to Paradox was about DICE 2016, so early 2016. I came on board almost exactly 3 years ago. I was, I think, number 4 in Paradox who got to see it. And the reason for that is that we had not started looking yet. We knew we would be wanting to do Bloodlines 2 at one point. After all, that is one of the great parts of World of Darkness. But it, to us, felt a good ways off. And then there was this studio that basically at that point already put down half a year of their own money and time and had gotten Brian fucking Metsoda in play to make this happen. And I, at that point, was a producer at Paradox, and I was considered the skeptical asshole, honestly. So they sent me in to go, okay, they have passion. Do they also have what it takes? It was a late evening Skype call. I knew it would be riding quite a bit on it. For Heartsuit Labs, this must have been a tremendous risk. And 1 hour after that, as I entered the call, I messaged Shams Yoyani, our chief business developer, and I told him, so first of all, I want to work with his people. Second of all, I love their ideas for what Bloodlines 2 might be. And then I spent the rest of the evening telling him what we need to make sure would happen in pre-production. So this was driven by them. It was a decision for them from a word go, because after that, none of us could really imagine somebody else doing it.
So this new game takes place in Seattle. What made you guys decide to take it to the Pacific Northwest? Is it because it was already dark and gloomy up there?
Yeah, went to a bar. I was texting from the bar, and Brian was at home. And, probably 20 minutes into the conversation, we kind of kicked around a couple ideas for cities, but we settled on Seattle almost immediately. Not just because we both live there, but it made sense in a lot of ways. The most superficial stuff is, Seattle's beautiful at night, and it has a lot of varying neighborhoods, and in the winter it's dark a lot, so that helps for vampires. But it also started to inform kind of the themes, and like Florian was saying, the motifs of the story. Not just the old versus the new, but kind of tradition versus progress. Seattle's a pioneer city. It has a long, rich criminal history, but it also has become, a center for tech. And it's a very booming city in terms of finance and all that stuff. So that tension between the two kind of started to inform what we wanted to do for the story, and it just started to snowball, where it made sense from a superficial standpoint, and then it made sense from a thematic standpoint, and then it started to inform the plot. And then that Saturday, I went over to Brian's house with a bottle of whiskey, and we nailed down the plot. Actually, Brian nailed down the plot, and I mostly just drank and went, yeah, it sounds awesome. Seattle was really the only thing that made sense as soon as we said it.
One of the things you guys mentioned to us earlier is there's you get to kind of create this background story for your character about who they were before they turned into a vampire. You can create an occupation. You mentioned barista. I'm really curious. Can you be a grunge band like singer or guitarist or anything like that?
No. I can't tell you what else you can be, but that is not one of them.
Obviously, grunge is something that many people associate with Seattle very quickly. One of the things that I think is great if you make it work for World of Darkness is that it's a very local kind of setting. It's about the city, and it's about where the city is right now. And grunge was, the 90s. That's the last generation. That's what the kids who are now doing the interesting stuff heard when they grew up, which is still interesting, but not necessarily what you're doing in your everyday life when you get turned into a vampire in 2020.
So what are some of the new abilities that players are going to be able to use in Bloodlines 2?
So the base abilities, one of the things we wanted to establish really early was the idea of kind of core vampire competence. Every vampire can run faster, can hit harder, can jump higher, can do, has to feel very supernatural. So there are a lot of new movement and combat abilities. There's a ton of new movement and combat abilities. On top of that, we also have the new Thin Blood powers that are available to the player. There's 3 of them. There's Chiropteran, which is sort of bat-based, so you can glide and you can fly and you can kind of bridge large gaps. There's Nebulation, which is mist-based. You can turn into a partial mist, and like at the lower levels, you can, basically you don't take damage from projectiles. Things go right through you. You can also use that for traversal. You can get drawn up into fans, that sort of thing, and kind of go other places. And then we've got Mentalism, which is kind of starts out as basically telekinesis. And then as you move that on, you can move and influence bigger objects, that sort of thing. So, and there are a lot others, but those are the ones we can talk about now.
So when you guys are talking about initial designs and stuff like that, like how closely do you work with the people behind the tabletop version of Vampire the Masquerade when sort of getting into the technical details of what could and couldn't exist within their worlds?
So Vampire Masquerade actually got a 5th edition last year, and the 2 games actually were developed more or less at the same time for some part of it. In terms of setting, it was very quickly established that this would be Brian's and Kai's and Kara's sandbox, and that they would be setting up what Vampire Masquerade was in Seattle, so to speak, what the Vampire Society was there. In terms of the systems, there was a good bit of opportunity for back and forth, and honestly, I think it's fair to say that the V5 team learned quite as much as, you guys learned.
It was a pretty frictionless process. It was usually just, we would have ideas for systems, they would give us feedback, they would have ideas for systems, we would integrate it. One thing that was actually really good working with Paradox was, or still is, the idea of not having to adhere too closely to the tabletop systems, and being able to do things that make sense in a game, as opposed to being kind of beholden to the specifics of the tabletop system. And that gave us a lot of freedom with developing disciplines that make sense, in a game, or an RPG, or, a video game, and not having to kind of like cram tabletop rules into it. So it was helpful.
I think one way of looking at it is that in the storyteller system, which is Vampire Masquerade, if you invest enough experience into an ability, you get another die to roll, and that can feel really cool. I'm rolling 7 die for this. In a video game, that is plus 10% effectiveness. Doesn't feel that good. A new toy is just, it's a video game. You adapt to the form.
So what's the new story for Bloodlines 2? Like, what are we doing here? What's our purpose? Why do we exist?
Yeah. So what we can tell you is you're a new vampire. You're created in a mass embrace, which is basically a whole lot of He's just like, don't say it. You're created in mass embrace, which is basically a lot of new vampires being created at once. In Vampire the Masquerade, creating vampires without permission is a huge no-no. So this is effectively a terrorist attack in the middle of Seattle for vampires. It's just like a bomb went off in the middle of the city. As one of those unsanctioned vampires, they basically want to, interrogate you, figure out what you know, and then kill you. That doesn't happen. It doesn't work out that way, and you wind up basically being a curiosity in vampire society. So you're the only one who was there. You're the only one who they know, who can kind of start to unravel that mystery, and then we kind of take it from there.
So we are releasing in Q1 2020 on PC, Xbox One, and PS4.